In the shadows of World War II, when Europe was scarred by destruction and hope seemed fragile, a secret American unit was formed, one unlike any other. It was not built of brute force or heavy firepower, but of creativity, illusion, and sound. This was the Ghost Army. A top-secret group of artists, sound engineers, and designers whose mission was simple in theory but daring in execution: to deceive the enemy, to make the Germans see and hear an army that didn't exist. The idea began in 1944 after the D-Day invasion. As Allied forces fought their way across France, U.S. generals realized they needed a new kind of weapon, one that could outsmart German intelligence, distract them, and draw their attention away from real attacks. The Deception Unit was formed quietly under the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Only a few knew of its existence. Even among the soldiers, many didn't know the full purpose of their mission. They were handpicked from art schools, advertising agencies, and design studios across America. Some had painted billboards in New York, others had studied architecture or sound engineering. They were not warriors by nature, but artists, asked to turn their imaginations into tools of war. And with brushes, speakers, and inflatable rubber tanks, they would change the course of battles without firing a single bullet. In the fields of Normandy and the roads of Luxembourg, the Ghost Army began their first great illusions. They inflated massive rubber tanks, so realistic that even from a few yards away, you could swear they were made of steel. From above, German reconnaissance planes would photograph them, reporting that hundreds of U.S. Sherman tanks had arrived near the front lines. The Germans would react, moving their forces toward a threat that wasn't there. And while they moved, the real Allied divisions slipped past unnoticed. But tanks were just the beginning. The unit had another weapon: sound. Using massive speakers, they blasted carefully crafted battle noises across the countryside: trucks moving, men shouting, artillery fire, even the distant rumble of engines. These sounds were recorded by the Army's sound engineers at Fort Knox and layered to mimic an entire armored division on the move. The sound carried for miles. German scouts would hear it and report that a major assault was underway, but again, it was all an illusion. The Ghost Army also mastered radio deception. Special teams imitated the radio traffic of real divisions, sending false signals that confused German interceptors. They studied how each commander spoke, their tone, their call signs, their habits, and replicated them perfectly. To the enemy, the airwaves sounded authentic. Behind the scenes, these men lived double lives. They set up fake headquarters with signposts, painted insignias on trucks, and wore uniforms of other divisions. If German spies infiltrated local villages, they would see what appeared to be a massive Allied presence: soldiers, tanks, and equipment everywhere. But when the real attacks began miles away, the Germans realized too late they had been chasing shadows. One of the most famous operations took place near the Rhine River in March 1945. The Ghost Army was tasked with convincing the Germans that the main U.S. crossing would occur at one point along the river, when in fact the true attack was miles north. For days, the artists worked under the cover of darkness. They set up more than 1,000 inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery. They painted fake tire tracks into the mud. They played continuous battle noises through the night. Even their campfires were positioned to appear real from the air. When German reconnaissance planes flew overhead, the deception worked perfectly. The enemy shifted entire divisions toward the fake front line, leaving the real crossing site weakly defended. Under cover of night, the actual U.S. forces moved across the Rhine with minimal resistance. The Ghost Army had done its job, saving thousands of lives without shedding a drop of blood. But the work was dangerous. If captured, these men could be executed as spies. They carried fake papers, and their mission was top secret. Even other American soldiers didn't know who they truly were. They operated close to the front lines, often under enemy artillery fire, risking their lives for an illusion. Still, they took pride in their strange mission. At night, when the speakers went silent and the rubber tanks deflated, they would sketch what they saw: the glow of burning towns, the faces of refugees, the endless roads of war. Their art captured the emotion behind the deception. Some even joked that they were fighting the war with paint and sound. When the war ended in 1945, the Ghost Army quietly disappeared. Their files were locked away under military secrecy for decades. The world never knew they existed. Many of the men returned to normal lives, becoming artists, fashion designers, and filmmakers. Some became famous, like Bill Blass, who went on to become one of America's leading fashion icons. Yet none of them spoke of the Ghost Army. It wasn't until the 1990s, nearly 50 years later, that their story finally came to light. The U.S. government declassified the records, revealing hundreds of photos: inflatable tanks standing proudly in muddy fields, sound trucks hidden under camouflage, and soldiers laughing beside their painted illusions. Historians were astonished. For decades, the Allies had been credited with victories that, in part, had been made possible by this invisible army of artists. Survivors of the unit began sharing their memories. They spoke of the nights spent setting up fake camps just miles from the Germans. They remembered hearing enemy shells landing near their rubber decoys. They laughed about how sometimes cows would wander into the inflatable tanks, causing them to collapse. And they reflected on the strange mix of fear and pride that came with knowing their weapons were made of air and imagination. In 2013, the surviving members of the Ghost Army received long overdue recognition from Congress. They were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest civilian honors in the United States. For many of them, it was the first time their families even learned what they had done during the war. They had carried the secret for nearly a lifetime. Today, the Ghost Army remains one of the most extraordinary stories in military history. It reminds us that war is not only about destruction. Sometimes it's about creation. It's about outthinking your enemy, using art and science as weapons of survival. Their mission stands as a symbol of human ingenuity, proof that courage can take many forms, and that imagination, when used with purpose, can save lives. As we look back on those dark days, we remember not only the battles fought with guns and tanks, but the silent ones fought with paintbrushes, speakers, and deception. The Ghost Army, an invisible force that fought with creativity, protected thousands, and vanished into history. Yet their legacy still echoes in every story of courage, every act of cleverness, and every reminder that even in war, the human spirit can find a way to turn illusion into victory.